let's talk about the distributions and what investors can expect because it does fluctuate. My understanding is that people are grouped into cohorts. So, can you explain that and what people can expect?
Yeah, that's right. So investors are grouped into cohorts, and that's where the risk pooling is happening. Cohorts are based on birth year. And so we group people by three birth years. 1945 to 47 is cohort one, 48 to 50 is cohort two, and so on. And each of those cohorts, as you pointed out, is paying a distribution level that will evolve over time. That's the nature of a dynamic fund like this. And so, we can't know exactly how they're going to evolve over time, but we've done a tremendous amount of work over the past number of months working with LifeWorks to prepare an income policy and an evaluation of how investors can expect under different market conditions those distributions to evolve over time. So the way that we will adjust the distributions and are adjusting the distributions is similar to how a defined benefit pension plan looks at its funding level. So we think about the assets in the fund and the liabilities, the future payments that fund is expected to make, and determines, how are we funded? Are we at the funding level? Are we above it, or are we below it? And every year, the fund will reset its distribution level to achieve at least 100% funding, if not more. Now, as we evaluate that over, we've looked at 2,000 economic scenarios in over a 35 to 40-year period. And the good news is that the fund is expected to increase distributions over time. There are years when it goes up, years when it goes down as we look forward. But over time, investors can expect more than that initial 6.15% for people at retirement age. So when we look at it over a 20-year period, the average that investors can expect is 7.1%. And if you look at it over a 35-year period, the average is 8.2%. So that idea that this fund has an inflationary component to it, or that it raises rates over time, plays out in the modeling work that we've done.
You just touched on the longevity risk pooling, and I don't think our viewers necessarily understand what that means. But that's the benefit of doing this, right? And that's what makes it different from a regular mutual fund. Can you, Fraser, can you explain that concept?
Yeah, absolutely. So, longevity risk pooling is just the idea that some of us are going to live average, some are going to live shorter, and some are going to live longer. And there's, quite a distribution around those numbers. The average that a 65-year-old today can expect to live is about 87 or 88. However, there's a huge range of possibilities for any individual. Mm-hmm. Now, if we need to protect that risk that we might live to be 107, it would cause us to spend very conservatively. We're trying to make that nest egg we have as we enter retirement last a very long time. But that's likely to leave a lot more assets when we pass away than might be optimal. So by pooling risk and having everyone paid out from the fund as long as they're alive, it effectively allows people to spend with confidence, knowing that even if they're one of the lucky ones and live a very long time, they will have that income. And that longevity risk pooling is created by the redemption structure. So as I said, when someone redeems, they're receiving back their unpaid capital. They're made whole for that investment, or NAV in cases where it's
but
lower.
Not necessarily the earnings because of that.
That's right. The returns that have been generated above and beyond that are staying in the pool for the others. And so it's the only fund really that allows investors to benefit both from market returns as well as longevity credits that are flowing from people exiting the fund. So it actually has a dual source of income for the members of the fund.
How does purpose protect itself from massive redemptions, right? Unlikely to happen, but is that something you obviously have to consider? And do you need a certain number of people to make this longevity risk pooling work?
Yeah, the good news on the number of people you need is it's actually surprisingly small to pool risk effectively. It's really only around 100 to 150 people per cohort, at which point you've effectively managed that risk. And when you think about redemptions, because they're actually beneficial to the remaining members of the fund, there's no harm. If this fund were to fill with members and then they were to all exit either voluntarily or by passing away, earlier than expected, that's actually beneficial to the remaining members. So in no way is this fund reliant on people staying in it. And in fact, if you think about it, the greater risk to the fund's rising distribution probability would be if people lived a lot longer. If everyone who buys into the fund lives to be in their 90s, the fund will not be able to raise distribution rates, to that level.
Yeah.
And we've modeled all of this. We look at, our assumptions around mortality are very conservative in a
Okay.
number of ways, but we've also modeled, what happens if people do live a year or two longer on average,
Yeah.
which we know the fund is quite resilient.
Welcome back. Fraser, on your website, on Purpose's website, I read an article of, one of the most important things that a retiree can do is have a proper retirement plan in place to combat inflation, which in fact, very few people do. It's certainly something I stress all the time. As we discussed, there's just so many variables that you have to think about, right? Can you talk about some of the examples of how this can help?
Yeah, of course. I think having a plan that looks at a wide variety of possible outcomes is the most important thing. So we've talked earlier in the program about the uncertainty that people face around what markets are going to do, what inflation will do, and critically, how long they will live. And so developing a plan that you're able to pressure test and make different assumptions about what happens if markets don't rise as they have been for a little bit. What happens if inflation holds at 8%? For a few years and everything becomes 25 to 30% more expensive. And what happens if I live a longer time? So, not only should people have a plan, but the plan should actually acknowledge the degrees of uncertainty and ensure that there's great outcomes that support the retirement that you're hoping for, regardless of which of those things play out. In addition to a plan, the only other thing I'd add is just finding a way to ensure that you're removing risk where you can, whether that's an inflationary sleeve in your portfolio or longevity risk pooling. I think those should be part of the plan. It's not enough just to write down a plan that says I'll keep doing what I'm doing.
How would you rate Canada's preparedness for longevity risk? And maybe the second part of this is what do we need to see? Like where are the opportunities to fix any gaps?
Yeah, we're lucky to be in Canada. I think we do have, good government programs that many other countries don't have. And so, we do start from a reasonable position. That said, those programs are not going to cover, everyone's needs. And I think a lot of people wake up to that as they enter retirement and look at the numbers and realize how expensive life is today and realize that there's a critical component to preparing yourself for this. Our government is working on new legislation, things like VPLAs that can be part of a defined contribution pension.
That's variable pension.
That's right. It's the idea of a dynamic pension pool. It's
Yeah.
essentially what we've created in a mutual fund, but the government
Okay.
is legislating to enable those to go into defined contribution plans, which is powerful. Advanced life deferred annuities. So the idea of being able to buy an annuity that kicks in later in life than our current ones do. These are important tools. What we'd love to see is the government playing a role in educating Canadians on the importance of this so that people do develop plans and understand where the risks lie. And also just, keeping up with the innovation. So we've created an innovative fund. It's important that the government frameworks around taxation, around regulation, that they accommodate new innovation. And that's how the Canadian government can support this, where Canadians take charge of their own financial future, which is ultimately what the government wants us to do.
Yeah. I was reading somewhere where, CPP, OAS, it only makes up for the average person about 40% of the income that they need. So they do need to think about that. Have you seen other countries, or have you been able to lift from other countries that have innovative solutions?
Yeah, there's great things happening around the world in this, slowly but accelerating. The Australians have copied things that Canada's been doing for several decades.
I've heard that,
and
yeah.
are implementing inside their superannuation funds, which is great to see. And there's elements of what they're doing that we've adapted into. We launched Longevity Pension Fund at exactly the same time as some of those programs went live in Australia. And now what's happening is the US is looking to Canada. There have been a number of articles written in US press, both in Forbes as well as some trade-specific journals, really almost envious of what we've got in Canada. So it's great to see countries learning from each other and trying to improve upon what each has. There is a growing tide of awareness around the world about the magnitude of this problem, how people are spending more time in retirement and frankly are not prepared.
We only have about 30 seconds left. Would Purpose look at expanding into some of those regions like the US and bring some of these solutions there? And is it easy to do? I know there's different regulations.
Yeah, nothing's easy to do. We'd love to take this globally. This is innovation that deserves to be available to people around the world. We'd also love to do more innovation in Canada. We think of longevity as a retirement platform, not just the longevity pension fund. We're trying to figure out how do we help Canadians unlock the equity in their homes. Many families at retirement are, quite wealthy in terms of the equity in their home, but may
Okay.
not have a lot of investable assets. So
Okay.
stay tuned for more innovation there.
Sounds great. We'll love to have you back on. Thanks, Fraser.
Thanks, Saijal.
Fraser Stark of Purpose Investments. Well, that's it for this show. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.